This is like going to heaven alive for me, because I've been looking at the language for years, trying to make sense of it, getting into philosophical debates with how this is pronounced. Is it Hotep? Is it Hetep? Turns out it's neither one of them. All right, so let me share my screen. I was Sometimes I wake up like at 3 in the morning, and I go in the other room not to disturb my wife. And I came across this video here. I don't know if you guys can see it. This one here that says, "What did the ancient Egyptian really sound like?" And I was captured just just knowing that. And then I went to in Yen Yensi's site, and just found so many things. I'm so happy that she has agreed to join us this evening. And without further ado, let's introduce this young lady in Yen Yensi. Thank you for coming to Black Knowledge Matters.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So,
welcome.
So I don't know if you want to go into a presentation or, look at some of the questions that I sent. However you'd like to proceed is fine with me.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with the meaning of my name, Inyanyenzi, because that was the first question.
Yes.
And Inyanyenzi, Nyenzi is a synonym, and our language is a synonym-based language. So it means anything that disappears and appears. And we see the use of this idea in the Rwandan genocide, unfortunately, by people who didn't understand the Proto-Bantu language, and they used the word Yenzi as a slur. So that caused quite a bit of problems. And when we discuss our African languages, this tends to come up because, and that's why I sort of took the position of saying this is the Proto-Bantu language, this is the first Bantu language, and every other language sort of comes from this. So we sort of have the original meanings of these sounds, and you will find that in our language, we don't have slurs, we don't have curse words. I don't know any slurs or curse words. I really don't. And it's not that I was never taught. We just don't have them. And I learned the Tempo dialect because my grandmother was an oracle and she was a rainmaker, and her entire family were rainmakers too. So we learned the Tempo dialect, and because of that, we understand the original language as it was spoken. And so the name Inyanyensi actually means a specific star that twinkles. So this also goes back to our beliefs of looking at the sky for our guardians. We don't have gods, we call them guardian spirits, and they're called Wasangu. So that's those are the spirits that guide us in this life. And actually the Mizimo are the spirits that guide us. The Basangu are the guardian spirits that brought us to the earth. So that's the belief there. And because of that, we sort of, I guess, Inyanyensi is sort of like the star system that we look for to identify our guardians in the sky, in the night sky. And let's see. So the next question was my linguistic background, right? So I am a native speaker of the Proto-Bantu language, and as I've just explained. So I suppose I'll start with my great great grandmother, who is my father's great grandmother. And she was the Ulaniga. Ulaniga means the owner of all the land. And I'm sorry if that sounds offensive. It's the way our culture works. There's a person who people follow, and that person becomes the ulaniga, and it's that person's actually responsible for everyone else that follows them, and they don't take tribute. So it's not a feudal system. It's actually more of they have to take care of everyone who comes to them. And this is why she comes from the clan Vantanga, and the Vantanga are the creator's clan, who we believe are the creator's clan. And because of that, she basically outranked every woman who would marry into our family because she's from the original clan. And we inherit her clan, her matrilineal clan, because we are matrilineal people. Although some people would argue today and try to say we are patrilineal, but that comes from the invasions. And that's how we know who was invaded and who wasn't, because people who weren't invaded still hold on to the original systems of being matrilineal. And there's a saying um, with the Vantanga that Vantanga begets those who were created with stone, and or the a bird. It's a Vantanga Vaihela Vagombwe. So that means the Vantangas beget the bird people, or and the totem is a bird, and so this actually is present. This is present at Great Zimbabwe, where the Himanansa were before they were pushed into Zambia by Mzilikazi. And Mzilikazi was, I go over this in my other videos explaining the history of Southern Africa, because Mzilikazi was actually, um, he was actually a mercenary. It turns out for Robert Moffat and the Land Missionary Society, it's a whole different history. And when you look at the people they were targeting the Proto-Bantu, any remnant populations, which is why it may seem like we don't have a history or we don't exist, because there was a genocide that happened. And Great Zimbabwe, as it looks like today, was not what it actually looked like um, before 1838. It was actually very intricate, and you could actually tell that it was built by people who knew how to how to build something. You would be like, okay, who were these people? And unfortunately, when it was invaded, a lot of that history was erased. And one of the reasons, I guess, we don't talk about it is because we have a belief system called, we call it malweza. When something bad happens, we don't talk about it. And that it's a sort of a it's a cultural issue, but we don't talk about it because we believe in the power of manifestation. So if you start dwelling on something, you end up manifesting it. So um, we don't talk about the old places if they were destroyed in a bad way, and that's why the history of Great Zimbabwe was only talked about by certain people, and over time they started dying out. So if you go into the tribe lands today, you might not find people, this is not common knowledge, because a lot of the people died out. And because we don't talk about bad things, they kind of took that with them. But we are now starting to understand that we need to preserve these stories so that we know where we're from and it makes sense and we know where we're going. So that's why I do what I do.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. God, I mean, that just hearing that, I've gained a lot of knowledge. I don't know if you want to continue with those questions, or if you want to share a PowerPoint, or I think the next question had to deal with What triggered you to follow and study these languages? What was the point where okay, you're speaking your language, you understand your language and culture, and then something happens where you notice, oh, well, this is connected to the people of the Nile Valley. How did you come to that?
It was a word actually on Fergus Shaman's website. I saw the comment on YouTube that said the ancient Egyptians were Bantu, and I never write off anything I see. I'm always curious, so I thought, okay, let me go see what this is about, and I started reading his research, and I found that he was really doing his best to show that the words were rooted in the Proto-Bantu, in the Bantu-derived languages. These words were also there, but they had changed slightly. And I found that when I translated them to my language, I could easily translate them without adding any words and only inserting the vowels. And so that convinced me that I was onto something. And it wasn't until I found a term of endearment that my father has called me since I was a baby, which is called nkaga. Nkaga is simply oversimplified, translates to little old person. And I found the exact word, and this word is language specific. You have to have native proficiency to know it. It's not a word that is a level one language word that you find people using um, pe- um, sort of people who don't know the culture or the language using. So that really convinced me that, okay, my language is connected to this. So I should look deeper into it. And I'm sorry, I found another word which was muzoga. Like inzoga is one snake, muzoga is another way we say that. And And that word itself is the name of my village, and it was the name of my uncle. And I thought, well, this is connected to us. This is us. And so I started asking around because one of the stories that we were told, and unfortunately, we just thought were just old men talking, was we came from the Nile. And I was like, oh, so there's something to that there. And then I started piecing it together because when I was growing up, they were still writing on houses. When they built a house, they would write on it like the hieroglyphs. There were still symbols on the houses. Those were still being done. And also there was we had the sleighs. When you look at the ancient Egyptian images, when they're dragging the stones, they're dragging them on these sleighs because people often wonder, why didn't the ancient Egyptians have wheels? Well, it's sandy, it's a desert, so it's like asking people why they don't have wheels in a when if they live on a river. They don't need them because they're on sand and they need a sleigh. Now we call that sleigh in Chali. And we had those sleighs when I was growing up on the farm. And they're very easy to pull because we used to play on them as children. And I recognized those sleighs and I recognized the symbols. And I started to really understand that, okay, there is a connection here. And I got into reading Sir Alan Gardner's book on ancient Egyptian grammar, and that was the one which I used to sort of prove that the ancient Egyptian language was what we call Plateau Tonga today, and it's still spoken, and we can show that.
Wow. Wow. I'm so your name is Little Old Person. Is
Yes.
No, you've obviously been here before. Maybe your great grandmother returned. I don't know, but this is just really fascinating. So, How long have you been, studying and comparing these languages?
I've been doing it in earnest for 2 years now because I found that common 2 years ago and I started really reading it. And it took me, I have to admit, it took me a few hours, less than a day, to understand the hieroglyphs, to understand the patterns. And that's what really convinced me that um, epigenetics actually works because it felt like a memory. And I was just easily reading them. And I remember when we were younger, we used to make fun of my dad's handwriting because it looks like the hieratic script. It really does. And we used to make fun of it because it was just so different from normal, I guess, expected English handwritings because epigenetics, I think, passes on, and that those patterns that we might not understand or maybe take for granted are present in what we do. And I just picked it up, and I started reading more about. I focused on the original sources rather than derived or interpreted sources. That's what I focus on because I find that when you go back to at least the first sources, you get the original material. And when you work with that, you're able to actually have a better result rather than something that was translated and interpreted by somebody else, maybe it's now sort of five um, times removed from the original source.
All right. All right. Are there any questions? I've been asking the questions. Are there any questions from the audience? Let's not all jump in at once. Let's try to show some decorum here. No, just kidding. All right, go ahead. Looks like Sebastian is getting ready,
Um,
and and then Kitty. All right.
um, why do you use the term hieroglyphs?
Well, because right now I'm trying to not get people confused. Um, f- so that's what I'm trying to keep that standardization and not get people confused because we do have the hieroglyphs or the symbols in Southern Africa, and some of them we believe were might have been destroyed or taken into private collections because most of the tombs that were at Great Zimbabwe were raided and looted, and they actually did have symbols, and the symbols were they had the crocodile symbol, which is called sivuwu. It's actually still a term we use. It's known to represent a head person or a lord, and it's different from the term mwami, which is lord. So the crocodile symbol is actually pretty common across Southern Africa, and a lot of the missionaries and explorers always commented on how the symbols that they found looked like the symbols in ancient Egypt. And I just call them hieroglyphs today just to maintain that standardization and also to ensure that people understand that I mean ancient Egypt as it was before 342 BCE. That's where I cut it off because after that you have the Greek invasion, and so that changes to Coptic. So I cut it off at the last native pharaoh because we still speak the original language until that point when it starts to change.
All right. Brother Kitty, my friend, happy birthday, Kitty.
Happy birthday to all of us. My birthday is our birthday. And I feel like I have just stepped into an intellectual paradise. And this is just our beloved sister Inyanyezi, I believe is your correct pronunciation. You're just so wonderfully eloquent, and we all salute you for your scholarship. I am particularly embedded in the East African community, planning to make it my home within the next year or so. And one of the things that I have found as I have gotten close to different groups of people is that the migration of Nilotic peoples from the Nile Valley in up the White Nile, the Blue Nile, and dispersed throughout Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and other parts of Rwanda, that the presence of Nilotic peoples tends to be much greater than what I had imagined when I first discovered it. Can you give us your insights as to the legacy of the migrations of the Nilotic peoples?
Yes, I actually created a video that there wasn't a Bantu migration, but there was more of a Zanj invasion. And unfortunately, the word Zanj is taken to be a slur, but I think it means the cattle people, because the etymology of that word, as I've observed in Nilotic languages, has to do with cattle. And they were cattle people and they were nomadic. So their culture, nomadic culture may have led them to experience times of hardship more than, say, the more settled populations. So when it came time to sort of find wealth or find some stability, they may have allied with external groups and the external groups they sought gold, and the gold mines were controlled by the Proto-Bantu, who controlled the gold mines in Gasha, which is Kush. They controlled the gold mines in the Katanga area and Great Zimbabwe, which people think were King Solomon's gold mines, but those were the gold mines they sort of targeted. And so we see when you kind of study the linguistics and the changes of the Proto-Bantu language, you start to see that a lot of the populations that were the Proto-Bantu populations that had some sort of stability and were invaded by these Nilotic groups. And they took the cattle because the Proto-Bantu had a lot of cattle, and the people who hired them took the gold. At least that's what it seems like, because a lot of people don't know about us because of that reason. And that's why, for example, I gave the example in one of my videos of the Zulu people. The Zulu people are were invaded by a Nilo-Saharan group, because when we look at their houses, the way they build their houses, they're very Nilo-Saharan built. But the Proto-Bantu used to build with stone, and they were stonemasons, and they used to mine gold, and they could carve intricate carvings from trees and so on. But when the Zulus were invaded, those things almost died out. So they almost had to resurrect them, and the way they build their houses is very odd. It's out of place when you actually understand African cultures. So, and then we see this again in Tanzania. I think there was a Proto-Bantu population there called the Haya. Now, the Haya are very important because they could actually work with carbon steel. And carbon steel, the knowledge of carbon steel is sort of unknown until sort of like later on the Industrial Revolution. But they actually had the knowledge of working with it. So the same way the Proto-Bantu could work with gold, not many people could actually work with gold. So you also see this issue with the Nilo-Saharan populations in in East Africa, where they don't work with gold. They can't really mine it, and they can't manipulate it. So it's it's sort of one of those topics that is kind of very sensitive still, and I was still looking for words to use, because there's a lot of when it comes to African history on the continent, there's a lot of it that remains that I guess people would rather not talk about. And this is one of those topics, because it sort of starts to place them in a light that they may not want to be in, or show them in a way that they may not appreciate, because for example, um, they were called the Gala in Ethiopia, and now they're known as the Oromo. So the Gala were known to be mercenaries, and they sort of invaded any Proto-Bantu kingdom from there was one Proto-Bantu kingdom in Angola, which was called the Benguela Kingdom, and that's where the Benguela currents, the name the Benguela currents comes from. And practically nothing is known of these people anymore because they were destroyed and they disappeared off the map. And the Gala sort of moved from that region back up to Sierra Leone. So they were moving. and so it's and that's because they were nomadic and they could move and they were warriors and they were used to that lifestyle. And you see their movements across Africa, because when people say the Bantu spread out and are all over Africa, it's not necessarily true. You actually have more Nilo-Saharan people, like you said, across Africa. And they're the ones who are sort of spread out because they were nomadic and they moved a lot. And they have an interesting history too that deserves to be told. And it may be uncomfortable, but we have to talk about it because it explains why things are the way they are in the continent today. It helps us explain and understand that. And just one last thing, it was Mogadishu. Somalia, the word Mogadishu is actually a Proto-Bantu word. It's actually Muga Jishu. Muga Jishu. Muga is a word that we use to say wife of. Jishu is like a great wind. So, but that's an oversimplified translation because Muga actually deeply spiritually it means the strength of. So when a woman is called Muga, it's a term of high praise because she's called the strength of her husband. And so Muga Jishu means the strength of the wind. And so because this place may have had high winds, and when we go back in time, we start to see that some of these, the coastal area was targeted because these places were where ships would sail to India. And East Africa has a very, very strong connection to the Indian subcontinent too, which is not talked about. It's lost history. And so African history, I think, started changing around 500 or 600 AD or CE, when we see sort of the Middle Eastern population move into Egypt. And then they start to sort of establish these sultanates. And what I was doing was focusing on where they started the sultanates and how they were establishing them, because we start to see a pattern and explain how people were moving and who they were using as allies and so on. And so the first sultanate is in Tunisia. Before it was Tunisia, that's where they established their first sultanate. And so the question becomes, what was so important about this region for them to establish a sultanate? The entire Sahara Desert there was more it was full of Nilotic people. And there were also the Mbuti related people in these regions. So then we have to sort of go back in time and explain who the Garamantes were and how the Garamantes would sort of hunt or kidnap and abduct the Mbuti, who were much physically shorter than them, and they would use them to work the gold mines that they had invaded. And that's how we see this population of the Khoisan, because the Khoisan, some of their language words connect back to the pre-Arabized Kabaya population in Algeria. So language is sort of what I'm using to connect people to their origin story. And it's very interesting and it's a very useful tool to do that. And I hope I answered your question.
I will say this much. your answer to my question was for me 1 year's worth of my finest academic studies that I guess I'm going to have to commit to as of today. My goodness gracious. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Minister Bill, go ahead.
Can you say more about your progress from computer science into this language study and how you managed? You came here to study computer science?
Yes, yes, I
Eh,
did. I completed my computer science degree, and I actually fell into linguistics accidentally and more interestingly. It was sort of something that had always fascinated me, but I had never thought I would pursue it until when was that? I found I was doing my public health degree, and we were doing systems thinking. And in order to improve a population's outcomes, you have to sort of understand everything about their customs, culture, so you don't change them and don't try to make them adapt to something they're not. So I wanted to help my ethnic group. And so I thought, well, let me start looking more into our language and our customs as an observer, because when you're living in something, sometimes you don't really make connections. And I will give an example of African American vernacular. I hope that's still the right term. It's sort of built on the structure, grammatical structure of African languages. That's why a lot of Africans easily understand it and pick it up, because it's the same grammatical structure. And so sometimes when you're in a culture, you don't really see how special it is, I guess, or what the important. You just see things as, oh, that's a crocodile, that's a symbol that's drawn on houses because that's where the head person lives, and you just keep living. And so I just wanted, I guess, to become an observer so that I could really understand us from that point of view, where we came from, how we got here. Because our story is actually one that was almost erased after the Mzilikazi invasion in 1838, because people became afraid to talk about us or even talk about it, and also the idea of Malweza, because they were actively being hunted and being murdered. So they stopped really not practicing the culture, but openly expressing that they were part of us. And we became sort of this silent moving group. And I really wanted us to find peace, I suppose, because we have gone through I guess, the machinations of being discriminated against and all of that. And the story is always incomplete. It was always, we are the earliest Bantu settlers, and that's where it ended. But our contribution to it was never really added to conventional history. And I just wanted us to sort of have our story told and understand exactly how we got here. And it's not a pretty story. It isn't, but I think it deserves to be told. And I sometimes have difficulty because it's very personal, and I try not to be offensive to others when I use
But openly identifying as who you were or are then might engender an attack from the same group that had been attacking your people for a long time, right?
um it it could, but I think we have to be brave. We have to choose to be brave, because in our culture we're actually taught to do that. There's a saying that we're taught from a young age. It's mutayowi, don't be afraid. We're constantly being reinforced with that idea. And whenever, a long time ago, whenever a person or a warrior was caught in a position they knew they had no way out, they were taught to circle back and turn around towards the person they were facing and face their spear to the ground, and just come forward and kneel down and take your last, let them do their worst. And that's because our culture is not an offensive culture. We're more defensive. We don't go seeking war. We're not allowed to actually harm anybody because we believe it cuts off a person's tether to the guardian spirits. And you sort of have to work back towards getting yourself reconnected. So we're taught not to harm anybody. And your life is something, I don't want to sound morbid, but your life is something that is not greater than the guardian spirits. It was a gift from them, and you can't be afraid to lose it. You go back to the guardian spirits if you lose it anyway. So we're taught to be brave.
All right. Thank you. Sister Zarita, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm just going to constantly keep saying thank you. The comment, so African American vernacular, no, it's not. We don't use that because vernacular means it's not tied to the autochthonous Niger-Congo languages that our language that we retain. As one linguist said, it is the linguistic continuation of Africa in the diaspora. So we don't say vernacular. Some of the linguists coined the term Ebonics, which means black sound, tracing it back to the West African Niger-Congo group. And we're taught that we know that all language is grammar ruled. All languages are ruled, have rules, and the rules are retained in the grammar. And my grandmother sounded just like someone from the West African region. My little sister could not understand her at all. And many of the elders, and as you go closer to coming from the motherland, retain more of those linguistic features. So we just say African American. You can just bond it. You can say African American Niger Congo linguistic patterns, and I love the term Nilo-Sus.
All right. Thank you, Sister Zarita. All right. Kitty, did you have your hand up a few minutes back there?
Well, I did have my hand up the one time. There was a follow-up comment that I think does relate very much to what our beloved sister has shared with us. With the migration of the Nilotic peoples, do we also see a continuation of deeply inherent spiritual cultural patterns traveling with them as well, especially since we've seen that the religion of the invasion, Christianity, has so deeply permeated much of Central, East, and West African cultures?
Okay. Well, we have to remember that the Nilo-Saharans were mostly warriors, and when warriors sort of travel, I want to say that in Africa, one thing we've observed is women are the custodians of a culture. So because when warriors travel, they typically just take what is relevant to them, and they don't take the entire culture. And so when they started to invade and settle within the groups they had invaded, they tended to hold on to the customs and the cultures that were relevant to them holding power. And then they would sort of allow anything that didn't threaten that power structure to keep going within the invaded population. So, for example, the way we're able to connect Ushaga and Umzilikazi back to the Maasai is through their dress, because there's an idea that Ushaga and Umzilikazi modified their spears and their fighting tactics, and they made their spear shorter. but the spear they're using is found among the Maasai way before. The shields they're using, the same pattern is found among the Maasai. And the Maasai were a Nilo-Saharan population that came down and they invaded and abducted women. Typically, they would abduct women to make them wives, and so that they could continue their population and hold on to their power. And so, and I would say they held on to the customs that sort of allowed them to hold on to their power structure. For example, like marrying multiple wives. That was sort of a control mechanism, because if they controlled, and if they had all the men sort of having to serve in their militaries, in their military forces, and a wife was a reward for that, they controlled that. And so that was a power, a sort of a power play. And it's very interesting, because and another issue is, a lot of them tended to adopt Islam, or they never really, I think, because Christianity came in late, or they just didn't really respect Christianity, the people that were bringing in Christianity. So and that's what sort of links them back to the Zanj rebellion in Iraq, because they had such a strong hold. They sort of held on to Islam so much that they helped establish the Sultanate in Mogadishu. And these are the conflicts that we see today, sort of like, they sort of go back to these times. And I always say that one cannot understand African conflicts without taking into account the history of the ethnic groups and their relationships. And so it's they're mostly, I guess, either like the Maasai, they held on to the customs and the practices that keep the men in power, or because they were the warrior class, and so they needed to hold on to that power to control the population they had invaded. And it's, I think that's a very actually it's a question that requires a lot of thought because it's it's very deeply connected to power and holding on to, sort of adopting a belief system. If they're going to adopt a belief system, they were going to do so with one that kept the power structure intact. And the problem with Christianity, as it came into Southern Africa, it taught that people were equal. And that was a problem, especially when you want to control everyone else. Because one thing is, in Southern Africa, especially, Christianity was translated into our languages because people were just not adopting it, just because they actually had questions, and they would actually question it and say, why is this, why do we have to believe in this? And it's very interesting because the San, who were very discriminated against in the 1700s and 1800s by the London Missionary Society and the Dutch settlers, had such a hard time with adopting Christianity, and rightfully so, because they were told the story of John the Baptist, and the story of John the Baptist has him wearing animal skins and eating honey. And their logic, and they were so right about this, because they asked, well, how come you revere this man who dressed like us and lived the same way we do, but you don't respect us? And so there was in Southern Africa, because people had their own beliefs, they really did challenge Christianity, and Christianity only became widely adopted as the invasions, the Mfecani, happened. Because, and I talk about the Mfecani more deeply and connect it to more of British interests and British foreign policy in Africa, and how it was actually, the Mfecani is actually not an African word. We don't have it, even though they say it's an African word. We're like, no, it's not. It's really not. We don't know what you're talking about. Meaning someone who thought they understood African languages may have created it and sort of imposed it on us. And so imposed a story on us that is not our story, because when we look at our languages, we look at how we live, the story starts to show, and the entire conventional narrative starts to fall apart, which is why I sort of go into this. And I will admit that the Nilo-Saharan population was sort of a touch and go for me. It's not something I wanted to touch for a long time, because I do understand the conflicts, and I really had to have enough evidence to show of what I was saying was actually true, in order to actually touch it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Keaty. And now we're going to have a question from John. Go ahead. Brother John.
Okay, let me I'm unmuted. First of all, sister, thank you so much, because a lot of what you said has just added so much credence and validity to this poetry that I've been writing, which I'm not going to share. But I have to go to another meeting, and I wonder, I hope this is not an awkward request, but could you speak? I'm told that you speak with the Kemetians from Kemetian. You speak the language. So I wonder if you could just, be so kind as to maybe introduce yourself. Tell me, brief, 1 minute synopsis of who you are in the language before I leave. Is that an awkward request? Or
No, it's not awkward at all.
okay.
So ndime Mabonwa. We start with Mabonwa, and ndime inyenyensi. Ndime mwana wa Jundu. Ndime mwana wa Jama. Jilongwe ja Mundalama. Mundalama wagali ulanyiga. Ulanyiga wagayaga yonse hintu hyotu hisunu. Wagatuletela bumi. Bumi bwesu. Bumi bwesu. Kuwesu alimwi aminzi yonse wagatuyagila aminzi yonse yotubona. Swebo bana bajundu twagazwa guli bana bahimanansa. Alimwi bahimanansa bagazwa gugami. Ngumuzikazi wagatuendeha kututola kuti tubole gukhala ajundu otukhala ono bantu batuita kuti vana monze mbana veni vana bajundu ndiswe jilenga nzobo ndiswe nzobo ya hina ndiswe nzobo jamuga mambo.
Wow.
Sorry.
Wow.
I'm kind of
No.
back and forth.
Beautiful.
Sorry.
I mean, man, I'm so impressed. I'm just, wow, that's great. So I just wanted to hear, hopefully, I didn't know if anybody was going to ask you that after I'm gone. So I just wanted to make sure that I asked you to share that. And I thank you for that.
Okay.
And I'll say goodbye to you all. I have to go to this other meeting like right now. Okay. So be blessed, everybody.
Blessings, same way. All right.
Okay.
Minister Bill is up next.
Yes, earlier you mentioned hieroglyphs, and I was thinking that's essentially what we call the Medinetter. Are those symbols are more phonemes than they are letters, and they really are tied to the sound of the spoken language. They're not really consonants and vowels like we have in English, right?
Okay. They are okay. So let me start from the top. We would say Majwi Nejali because Majwi is actually the correct term for it. We still use it. It's voice and speech, and my dad always uses it when we talk to him. Ndahwa Majwi and Ndahwa Gabotu. Like, I've heard your voices and your speeches. I feel good. Nejali is a word that it's a synonym for nostalgia. So the language itself comes from the idea of sound. Yes, and our creator, our creation myth actually says that we were created from sound, and science sort of proves this in how we can sort of create an ultrasound image from sound. So we believe that sound was used, and our creator we call Mulimo. Mulimo was our creator, and that's the most beautiful sound. And that is actually, they call her Nefertiti, but her name is actually Nohvli. It means the most beautiful sound. And so sound is what we call the language, and I think maybe that's what I should probably rethink and call it the sounds and not the alphabet, because every consonant vowel pair that we have, and sometimes we have the biliteral or the triliteral pairs, like for example, when we say aba, that's a B and an A, that's a consonant vowel pair. And but when we say bwe or joy is a mountain or huge stone, that is two consonants and one vowel. And our language always has terminating vowels. So there's nothing, it's sort of organized that way. And I guess, I don't want to say every consonant has a vowel pair, because some, well, I do have the alphabet, but some of the the double consonants and vowels don't exist. They're just a subset of them. For example, the sha sound, which means foremost, and this sha sound is found across East Africa too. That's the sha sound in Shangala. It's the same sha sound in Ogasha, which is Kush. And because we know how to translate the ancient Egyptian sounds, we can translate the sounds of Rasha, Kush, because they sort of they sort of share the same border. So we can sort of understand them now. And eventually I'll get to that point where I add the translation of the sounds of Rasha to the app that I'm creating. So
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. All right. I have a question, and I see Minister Makalisi is kind of falling asleep there. But it's a question that he had sent, and you had actually had sent me the answer to it. So I'm going to share my screen. And okay, where was I? It was, I think this was it. So Minister Makalisi, he has really introduced this term to our spiritual movement, and it's Septepi. And I asked you about it, and you explained it here. Maybe I should make it bigger so that people can see it better. Let's see. So you explain that. Could you just help us out how to say it and what it means in the Proto-Bantu language? Septepi. We know it as Septepi, but obviously it's It's a try at what it really sounds like.
Okay. It is Zapa Tupai. Zapa Tupai. Like basically za, like I said, means to come, and then pa means to bestow and give, and then tu is us. That's the tu in Bantu, us or we, and pa, like, well, pai or p is a change of state. So what this was basically, we can see from the structure of how it's structured, it's talking about someone that came to bestow us and change our state. And so because of the stories about our creation, and so on, we believe that the ancient guardian spirits, we don't call them gods, we call them guardian spirits because they're our familiars. We don't, I want to say, we don't pray to them, but they take care of us. We understand that their role is to care for us, and we don't even have to ask because it's already taken care of. And so they come from the east, and that's why when people are buried, they're buried in facing the east. And this has to, I think, it has to do with the night sky, and it's something I'm still getting into, understanding the stars and how to read them from the east, because that's very important, and I should probably know it by now, but I have to relearn it. So these beings that came, we believe they bestowed onto us and a change of state that allowed us to sort of live in this environment, live on this plane and on earth. And it sounds very fantastical at first, and a lot of our stories, I guess sometimes that's why they're not told, because they sound very fantastical until you start thinking about it and investigating it more deeply. Because one of the stories is about the portals. There are portals in Southern Africa where it was believed people could travel through. They were way gates, and these were covered up. There's one under the Kariba Dam. So if you kind of look at the map of Zambia, there's a huge dam between Zambia and Zimbabwe, and that's called the Kariba Dam. And there's a portal underneath that where it's believed that there were a group of people that used to travel through that area, and it could be opened and lead to another place. And because we never went through it, we don't know. But there's the other story about how our I don't want to call him a king, but how it was our High Lord, I guess, got murdered in 1838. Was for a long time they could not find them, they could not see them, because they had the science. I call it science, not magic, because I call it science we just don't understand yet. They had the science of veiling themselves. It's called Guhuna, and that is the same. That is the name of Kufu, Uhuna. That's his actual real name when you translate it, and that's called to be covered. That means to be covered, and so once somebody is covered, they can only be seen by people they want to see them. And Mzilikazi, it said, found a person, sort of a practitioner who could uncover and gave him the antidote to see what was unseen, and that's how they were revealed. And then that's how the genocide happened, and it was an unexpected thing. Now, this story sounds fantastical until, for a lot of people, um, it becomes more possible when you start to understand what the British were doing. in Southern Africa at that point, they couldn't find this region, which they called which they really wanted, because it was covered up. They couldn't find it, and they wanted the gold. So a lot of those gold mines were not found because they were covered, and they've never really been found. And when the British finally started settling in that region, which is now Zimbabwe, they started collecting these old relics, and there were these clay pots, and these clay pots were sort of markers where people knew that if you walked past that point, you would get to a portal. And they started, the Africans that settled there later on would complain about hearing people but not seeing them. And then they would call the British in to sort of come in and find these markers, and they would take them. So the British have a lot of our relics, and I guess they've just sort of taken them, and I don't know if we'll ever see them again, or maybe we'll just have to recreate them. But it's sort of a very, it's not, it's something that I think is hard for people to understand, which is why I call it science, because when we try to explain, okay, we don't have a story of migration. We really don't, as a culture, as a tribe. And people had so many cows, but no one saw us actually moving from one region to another. And the question becomes, well, how did we get here? Because nothing we have is about a migration. And that's where the portals come in, because there's no evidence of us actually migrating, but we somehow end up in these places. And so that's another thing where they must have known how to manipulate nature the same way those stones were lifted and placed where they were lifted. They understood that science, and they knew how to use it, and they did use it, and it wasn't magic, it was science.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's something I think we have to sort of go back to understanding.
Yes, yes. Wow. It's fantastical, but when you see that they're making movies using the same type of technology, then it's not so fantastical. For us that watch science fiction, you're describing cloaking devices and like you say, portals, and things like that. Brother Katabasi is next. Go ahead, brethren.
Okay. Again, thank you, sister, for your presence here this evening and sharing your information, everything with us. I may have missed something, but I thought I heard you say that your people, your group don't speak of gods. You refer to them as guardians. And so
Yes.
the question that came to my mind is do you acknowledge any presence, any entity beyond the guardians?
Yes, we do have two, actually. We have one is a female god. I guess you would call her a female goddess. Is Mugamambo. She's the presence we sort of ask for rain, because I know that because my grandmother was a rainmaker. So the song there's the song they sing to ask for rain, and her name is Mugamambo, and Mugamambo means the strength of dialogue. So because when they go to the mountains, which we call Malende, to ask for rain, they are in a dialogue, and the song they sing actually goes. It translates to we have like look at our troubles, look at our troubles. It starts, firstly it starts, the earth has shrunk, the earth has shrunk. Look at our troubles, look at our troubles. You helped us fight for this earth, so answer our prayer for rain. That's a loose translation of what they're saying when they're on the mountains. And it's more of an expectation that she'll answer. The other, I guess you would, if it was a creator spirit, there, I guess maybe there are three actually. There's Mulimo, the sound spirit, what that created everything that we see on earth. Everything that we see on earth was created by beautiful sound, and everything is about sound. And so they would, and that's why music is so important in African culture. It connects to that idea of sound is life and sound creates beauty. And so that's Mulimo. And then Jilenganzowu is what we call the sun, because the sun is the energy giver. It's the spirit of life. It's what allows life to happen on earth, and also it allows us to grow food. And so that is Jilenganzowu. Wulenga means to create. And then Zowu is space. It's space and light. It can be translated to mean space or light. And so to create light or space. So they, if we had to say three gods or ones that are actually higher than the guardian spirits, these are the three that are higher than the guardian spirits: the sound, the sun, and Mugamambo. Mugamambo is like the most, like she's sort of the one who taught us what we know as human beings. She taught us how to live in this world.
I see. And so these guardians are responsive to the three higher higher entities, for lack of a better term.
Well, okay, so let me just go back to their name. I guess then it's in their name that we call them Vasango. So these guardians are sort of, I would say they are. Let me start from there are some people that are an extension of these guardian spirits, and within those same guardian spirits, they are. I mean, okay, to simply answer your question, yes, they would be sort of doing the will of those other three higher spirits, because those other three higher spirits are what make life possible for us on earth. So they would be doing their will. And
very good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brother Katabasi. There's a couple of things that I would like to share before we go. We have about 15 minutes left, and I'm enjoying this tremendously. But one of the things that I find very, um, is kind of connecting the dots for me is this. So this is the glyph for the face that we're told, and it looks like a South African. This is how the ancients along the Nile wrote. They wrote in pictures. They wrote something that looks like a South African when they wanted to write when they wanted to write a glyph for a face. And when Obama went into a pyramid, he saw an image that looked like him. His face, his ears. He kind of looked like this brother. And here's some more. But also, And this I found in Michael Tellinger's book. This Ankh, he says, goes back 200,000 years. This is in South Africa. It's an Ankh and just like she was saying about the sun, it's an Ankh inside a circle with rays going out. And also, I'm not sure where this one is, but here is Hor or Heru. You know, in the South African, um, you know, this is where these are petroglyphs in South Africa. So I'm seeing a connection. She's just, for me, in Yin Yinsi, you're helping me connect the dots, and I really appreciate what you're doing. Go ahead, Minister Bill.
Yes, you mentioned that there was genocide of the Proto-Bantu people in what's now known as Great Zimbabwe, but much of what's been recovered is just a fraction of what was actually there. Did I get that straight? That in fact, some has been recovered, but it was really much, much more than what's been recovered, right?
Yes, absolutely. The way the Great Zimbabwe ruins look today is nothing compared to what they actually looked like, and the design of the design they had of the step design is something that my grandmother actually did in our village. There's a place where we have those steps, the same similar steps, and she was still constructing it before she died, so it's unfinished right now, but a lot of the history that we know about Great Zimbabwe was erased. For right now, we can only speculate why it was erased, and until we sort of understand the goals of the erasure. But all the Proto-Bantu populations were sort of systematically targeted. There were the Nkoya in they are the ones who were in the Malawi area before the current population in Malawi. They were scattered, and they actually came down to Zimbabwe, and they were the Mutapas. The initial Mutapa dynasty was actually Vina Mutapa, and I talk about this just like the Kushites, because ours is it's a strongly matrilineal culture. So because mothers are very important, and so it was called Vina Mutapa, and that was destroyed by 14 or 1500. We see a destruction of that. So what we get after that, who are the Shona, are actually a new group that came in. And if you read, there's a Portuguese writer that was in, I'll send a link to his book. I have it sort of translated by ChatGPT. It's written in Portuguese. I'll send a link. He sort of describes what the court and the royal court and how the state in which he finds it in, and you can still see the remnants of the Proto-Bantu influence and population. And this was the population that stayed when they were invaded, just like some of our population stayed in Matabeleland after the invasion, because they just couldn't see themselves abandoning their homeland, and they refused to come to Zambia, what we call Zambia today. And so they stayed and they wanted to stay in their homeland because they had lived here for so long. So the history, I think that there was
Yinzi, you're kind of you kind of froze there. Are you still there? Well, as we're waiting for her to come back or to get unfrozen, wow, this has been. Here she
and a
is.
lot of because we still have to figure out. Sorry, yes, I'm still here. Oh, did I cut off? I'm sorry.
You know, periodically you freeze a little bit just for a split second, but that was the longest time since we've been connected. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. It says low bandwidth, and I guess because I'm currently in the basement because I was trying to avoid the noise. So it's probably.
Yes. Anyway, we have two questions. First, Brother Keaty, and then Sister Zarita.
All right. Great to have you back. Glad we did not lose you. This is compelling. Are you being supported by any of the African governments? I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you are from Rwanda. Am I correct?
Zambia.
Zambia. Okay. Are you being supported? Also, I have a dear friend. He lives in Kigali, Erica Berra, from the Rwanda Cinema Center. And I'm telling you, after listening to this conversation, I think I'd like to send this recording to Erica Berra and see if he would be able to assign a documentary team to be working on helping to spread this narrative at a much larger basis. Are you being supported by any of the governments there?
No, not yet. I guess a lot of times that African history is very sensitive because there's a lot of I guess sometimes they don't want to look like they're favoring one ethnic group over others. So we still don't have a program to support every ethnic group, and there are about 72, so they would have to sort of create that, and it comes back to the politics of debt and so on. So right now, we are just taking it as we can and doing our best to make these stories heard and known.
All right. Well, if you need to reach out for assistance and help, I hope you do not overlook this beautiful Wose community. We're on your team. We're in your corner.
And Yensi, that was one of the things before we get to Zarita and Michael Kubaka. That is, can you put in the chat how we can contribute to your studies? Can you put that in the chat?
Oh, okay.
Okay. And as you're doing that, Sister Zarita, go ahead. Bill, did I skip you? I'm sorry. Did I? No. Okay. Zarita.
Yeah, I'm right here.
You go ahead, and then Michael, and then Bill. All right.
So I have two questions. Would you repeat the name for Khufu and Septepi? And the group that you're working with, how large is it? And thank you.
Okay. Septepi is Za-tu-pai, and then actually it's Za-pa. Sorry, I always miss the pa. Za-pa-tu-pai, and then Khufu is Guvuna, and that's the first part of his name. It's actually longer. I translated it a while back, and I would need to look back into the translation, the actual hieroglyphs. I could send it later on when I find the translation, probably tomorrow. But that was Guvuna. And so right now, I am working on this with 3 other people, and they're all part of my ethnic group. And we are sort of building this repository of this historical knowledge together.
All right. Thank you for putting that information. So now she's put her PayPal information in our chat, how you can contribute to her. And we have about 2 minutes, but we're going to go over. We're everybody cool with that? We can go over like 15 minutes. What do you say? All right. Michael Kubaka Harris, are you related to Kamala? No, just kidding. All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, that's my sister. She go to church in San Francisco with brother Amos Brown, and so she's all of our sisters. If you have a spirituality to you, my question, actually, I spent a little time in South Africa, and one of the most telling things for me was knowing that it's the thickest part of the Earth landmass, and just amazing wealth and how warm and beautiful it is. But the question is what type of food, ancient foods, should we be considering, not only to eat but to grow and to feature?
Okay. I think they had a very diverse diet. Most of it was because they lived near the rivers, so they would fish a lot. Fish was an important part of the diet, and we still fish a lot. And then there was cattle. Cattle was also a very important part, but that was for special occasions usually, unless somebody was well off. So the cattle was reserved for special occasions, and we have what we call it chiwantu now, but the ancient drink that Egyptologists have called beer. It's actually not really beer because we grow up drinking it as children. It's just a fermented drink. It's a fermented grain drink, and we still make it the same way. We find a grain, and right now we make it with corn. So we make it with grits. You can make it with grits. It's basically cook the grits. I know this because it's typically women who have to learn how to make it. And so you typically cook the grits like a porridge, and then you get a root of fermentation, a root for fermentation, and then you put it into the cool down porridge, and it ferments over time. And then you you can give it to children. Like I said, we grew up drinking it. It doesn't, and it's something the ancient Egyptians drank too, and they made it just the same way I explained that they made it, like we make it today. It's very, very basic, and I suppose some people now put some additional ingredients for different tastes, strawberries and whatnot, and so it just comes down to preferences. And then peanuts are a huge part of our diet too right now because they're a very nutritious food, and we kind of, I guess, our ancestors lived in times of war and conflict and famine a lot, so peanuts were very filling. And this is another thing I think that almost got lost was our sort of our original foods. I remember my grandmother cooking a lot of duck. She loved to cook us duck. We never really took to it, unfortunately, to our disappointment. We always preferred the chicken. And so she would always try to get us to eat the duck, and she always cooked it so well. And but we just never took to it. And there's something we call munjoli. It's basically it's a peanut vegetable. It's vegetables with peanuts. It's made in a very specific way where the vegetables are dried, and then the peanuts are pounded into a flour and it's mixed together, and you get this sort of it's really tasty. We love it. It's we grow up eating it, um, and also there's a specific way we make okra. We call it delele. We make okra, and then there's samp. I think most of the food might actually be similar to the food eaten in the southern parts of the United States. Like boiled peanuts are another thing that we do eat quite a lot, and they well for it well those are sort of the um we do eat a lot of sweet potatoes, and potatoes. I remember my grandmother actually, um, the first time I understood that she was actually a great person was when she was tilling her field and weeding it, and I came to sit with her, and she lit a fire. She dug a little hole, created an oven in her field, put some sweet potatoes inside the little hole and the fire and covered it and told me those sweet potatoes will be ready soon. So she went back and continued to till her field, and then I fell asleep and she woke me up later on with some tea and some sweet potatoes in the field. And it's something that I treasure because those are some of the best memories I have of her. But sweet potatoes and also squash and those squash and what are they called? I'm sorry. The squash family of foods and melons. Those are very important in our culture too.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that question. Go ahead. Go ahead, Minister Bill.
Yes. Here in the US, we get some press about the very formal Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa and the relatively formal reconciliation process in Rwanda after the genocide there. But my sense is you're obliged to dance around where there hasn't been such a formal reconciliation and the tensions are still kind of there and high and much more nebulous and gray, and it's not clear. So people might easily be offended, right? And people who came and killed others are still in place and have power, right? So you can't really offend them, right?
Yes. So I think it's about using facts and data to ensure that we're not being accusatory. We're not trying to say we want our land back. Or, for example, the Ndebele are already settled in Matebele land, and we can't just say, wake up tomorrow and say, we want our land back. This is where our ancestors are buried. Firstly, we believe at this point it's Malwesa, it's bad land, basically. And unfortunately, we just have to leave it as is. And so we do have this tightrope to walk, especially when the rhetoric starts to get ugly. Because right now in Zambia, there's sort of that push and pull where you kind of have this. Before the elections a few years back, our ethnic
Yes.
group was being openly attacked. And this was something we thought, okay, this could easily become a problem if this other group decides to become violent. And we really sort of held our tongues and we kind of just ignore. You sort of start to understand that if you ignore it, and don't respond and don't give it an audience, it will somehow just stop. And it's always worked so far, and we're hoping it keeps working. And unfortunately, in places like, say, Rwanda, I don't know, maybe we have to go back in time to understand exactly what led to 1994, because it wasn't just 1990 to 94. It's a history that goes back in time to the 1800s. And when the history of Rwanda was actually changed a bit, when the Tutsis were accused of being invaders, but the problem is the Tutsis are actually ethnic, they're part of the larger Hima and the Haya Nkoya group. So these are the Proto-Bantu people. So how can they be conquerors in what was once their own ancestral realm? And that's why I do this work, and it's to help us all understand that we have a story, and this is my story. Yours is different, and that's okay. We all have a story, and all of us deserve to have our stories told and heard. And telling my story doesn't somehow diminish another person's story. It just makes us more curious as to what's
Okay, she's
of that ancestral line, and also the shortcomings of every group, so we can all do better.
Thank you.
right. Thank you. Okay. I wanted to ask you about the app that you're working on. How close are you to finishing it? And will it be the kind of app where we will type in a word and get the Proto-Bantu um, equivalent of that word?
Yes, I actually added that feature thanks to you because I had thought about it, but I hadn't really thought it was important because in my head I was just like, well, it's a Proto-Bantu app, people are just going to use it. But then when you mentioned it in one of the messages, I thought to myself, yes, we need that because that would help people who speak English understand exactly what's going on. And yes, so that's one feature that I'm adding right now. And so I hope to be done with it by the end of October and have it in the app stores by then,
Oh,
because
wow.
it's a synonym based language, and I I guess I had to understand how to make that clear to connect it to English and say, okay, what we're looking at are synonyms. So a synonym has many other words that can be used to describe um, a context or an action. And so,
All right. All right. Are you working on a book by any chance?
not right now. I was doing my best to focus on the paper, the linguistic comparison paper, and get that published because I initially felt that publishing a paper and getting it peer reviewed was a better way of actually validating what I'm doing so that I can actually defend it and make it clear that this is valid. It's not just somebody that's talking and saying, yes, this is what it is. We actually put in work and it's going to be put into the general, the human record, basically, and say, this is where we ended up. And so that's why I focused on the paper initially more than a book.
All right. All right. Well, um, our time is just about gone. Somebody just wrote in, Michael just wrote in, simply blessed wisdom in Yen Yenzi. Yes, you have they gave you the right name. That's you are. I feel that. Not that I'm, have any special powers or anything, but that's something that I definitely feel from our very first meeting. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing? And would you come back and meet with us sometime in a couple of months? We'd love to get together with you and ask you some more questions.
Yes, I would love to come back. I've had a really good time. Thank you for being so receptive and providing the environment to share this knowledge. And I believe this is our entire African story, and anybody that has ancestry from on the continent deserves to know this story because it ties into everyone else's story and every adjacent population story. And it's so important that we get to tell our own stories because oftentimes when other people tell them, they undermine what they're reading or looking at, and they don't put as much reverence to it the way we would understand um, things like the science part of it. They would just say that's just magic or something. That's just nothing. It's nothing to. But we understand that it's science and it's something that we need to rediscover and repractice and make a part of our world again. And Africa, I can see from my culture that Africa was a beautiful place once upon a time, and it's still beautiful. That's why the beauty of it doesn't entirely disappear because it was built on the concept of beauty and peace and love and harmony. So I think it's our responsibility to uphold that and keep telling these stories no matter where we are and where we go. And thank you so much for being open to what I have to say and just providing the environment and your work itself and holding on to your work and what you believed was our human story, because you make this possible. You made it possible for me to find this knowledge and say and do the comparisons, because you actually say, no, this is our human story. And I just thought, well, we have our own story here, and I would not have made the connection had it not been for you guys' work and how you guys have held on to the conviction that our human story is important. Thank you so much for creating that environment.
Thank you. And I just want to share one more thing. But before I do, I see Brother Sebastian has that your brilliance is second to none. Sister Thandiwe says you are truly blessed to be a blessing. Brother Keaty said absolutely brilliant presentation this evening. Baba Jeff said wonderful. Michael said, simply blessed wisdom, little old person. Thank you. And again, go in the chat, click on the PayPal that she put in there so that we can contribute. But this last thing I want to share, and because we're told that this is all just connection with European and everything, but here Nelson Mandela is wearing the same collar that they wore in Kemet, and these sisters back in the Middle Kingdom are wearing the same collars that the Nguni people are. So, as Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop told us, there's a cultural unity of Black Africa. All right, guidance and protection, everyone. I just want to say next week we're not meeting, or we're taking a break next week, but we'll get back. And Yen Yensi, that was great. Oh, can you send me your phone number? I'd like to talk to you personally, just if you put it in the chat. Yeah, that'd be good.
Blessings, blessings. Wonderful presentation.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. Very, very good.
Thank you.
Loved it. Greetings to everyone. It was a great investment of our time.
That's right.
Yeah.
We didn't waste our time coming today. And we had 29 people to come to our Black Knowledge Matters today.
No, bye.
Say again?
It's like 32 people on there now.
All right. All right. Thank you.
And Yen Yense, thank you so much for the information regarding the boiled peanuts, the yams, and the okra, because my family's from South Carolina. Their land's on sand, and I can remember going and digging up peanuts and yams out of the sand. So thanks for that.
Yes, that was awesome.
I'm glad you did.
I'm glad you explained the beer, because in our holy book, which is called the Hosea, one of our holy books, it talks about the mother bringing bread and beer for their teacher, and you explained it's not like Heineken's or Falstaff, but it's that it's really a nutritious drink. Thank you for giving me your number. Let me put it in my phone before I sign off. All right, I want to thank everyone. Damani, be careful out there. Glad to see you, Michael. Thanks for coming by. Jeff, I'm glad you could make it. Iban, Zarita, Celeste, Mama Rose, Mama Mona, all of you, you all made it a success. And thanks again, in Yen Yenzi, for such a brilliant presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Hey, real fast, Ms. Emerson, you said it was a PayPal link to send a donation?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'll send it to you. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Night, night. Live up.
Live up.
Good night.
Outstanding.
Yes.
Outstanding, Brother Minister. Thank you so much.
We will see. We will see. All right. That's a joke we had.
We will see.
We will see. Yeah.
Baba Jeff.
Yes, sir.
We could chat for a minute.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Of course we. I'm going to turn over.
Okay. So if you might stay for just a second, I had a general question about our tributes. I ran across some stuff. Bubba Jeff and I had talked about maybe bringing in materials that are really quite polished, quite good, and in the right content area, and just using primarily what others have done. I ran across some today. They look really quite good in terms of content, but the presenter is not African, and it's from PBS, and some of the language could still use a little help. It's not bad, I'd say 90+%, but there are sort of terms that we don't like to use. They're loaded terms, and not everyone's sensitive to those, but I think, as we'll say, we have to be.
Yes. Oh, no question. No question.
Okay.
Yeah. No question.
So I'll send some of those by, pick out a few, and they're all short. They're actually sized just about right for our historical tribute in the 10 to 15-minute range.
Okay.
And especially if we cut a few seconds out here and there, they should fit just fine. But again, there's the issue of the presenter and the language. So okay.
Maybe you can send it, and then we can make a determination.
Will do. Yeah. I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's all. That's where I am.
You know that. Did Gloria get in touch with you?
Yes, she wants to meet early Saturday instead of 3 o'clock.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's not a problem for me, but I understand you might not be there.
I'm not going to be there.
Okay.
And that's okay with me. I'm all right.
Okay, cool. All right. You guys got it.
North Florida is officially in its rainy season, so
yeah,
yes, I'll be indoors anyhow.
I saw that, but the day of the wedding is it's supposed to be it's not supposed to rain.
Okay.
So, but Thursday and Friday it's going to rain. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. I did get a gap when we were at Bethune-Cookman. I saw the weather report was 40% rain, but it was sunny all day for us.
Oh, well,
yeah. So my workout for you also, I decided I'd try a zip line. It worked out fine.
You know what? You know what? I went with Rob one time. It was between 7th and 8th grade. It was the summer, and we went to Costa Rica, and we were in the rainforest, and we must have went through like 15 zip lines. We're going like 40 miles an hour. Way up at the top of the trees.
Yes.
We did a lot of dangerous stuff on that trip that I'm sure if it had been here.
What was Mama Doris with you?
No, it was just
me.
Oh,
no.
It was just me and Rob. And we also did this like river raft that I'm sure was a 10. It would have been a 10 here. Here.
Okay. Yeah, there was one that we saw, Rita and I saw in Jamaica, but at the time passed on it. Yeah. But it's not bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't
do it. I think the one like you're talking about in Costa Rica, like really up in the mountains, is maybe even nicer. The one I went to was just in a park. It was, a little back and forth between the trees in the park. So really nothing higher than about 40 feet.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That yeah. I'm telling you, man, we were way up there. You know, just yeah. I'd like to find out just how high we were. We were way up there, and you had to have those hard hats on.
Hard hat?
If I didn't have a hard hat on, it would rub my head off. You know, just
Uh-oh.
yeah, because I got a cable a couple of times. You know, I was so
Yeah, I was warned. Don't get your hands in front of the pulley.
yeah, yeah, that could be bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bail. You guys, Bill, let me make you.
That's all I had. I'm done.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay.
see you guys soon. Live up,
Hey, Mama Rose.
Mama Rose.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Mama, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
All right.
You know, I've been seeing you in a long time. We have to get together, man.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
We'll be talking.
Okay.
Okay, love you.
Love you too.
I hadn't seen Kabaka in a long time either.
You know what? I hadn't either, man.
He's still hanging with the state?
You know what? I had to go to a memorial service on Saturday, and it was in that old building on 35th Street.
Oh yeah.
And there was the owner. His name is Lamont. Oh, I wanted to say something. This will only make sense to Alicia and Bill, but Reggie Graham passed away.
Oh,
Remember him?
I'm not clear. Who? Reggie Graham?
The musician.
Oh.
You know I mean he was a gospel musician.
Hmm.
Wait a minute. Let me. I have this thing I saved, but yeah. This is Reggie, and I woke up this morning is with deep sadness and a heavy heart that we say goodbye to my father, Reggie Graham, a man whose love, kindness, musical talent, and I mean, you know, he was a jazz musician. He was a gospel musician. He played at, 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 at some of the big churches here.
Hmm.
I know at his funeral it's going to be, you probably can't get in.
Hmm.
Anyway, it's going to be at Center of Praise on October 3rd. But okay, if you don't know who it is, then.
Hey, Brother Minister, can you do something for me? Just do me a favor. Can you put the announcement for this Black Knowledge Matters today? Put it in the chat because I wanted to grab it because I was at Rose on Sunday, so normally I try to pick it off if I'm
Sure
online, so
sure.
that way I can have it.
Yeah, let me.
Because this is just so outstanding today, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this was great. Yeah, she was marvelous, and you know her name is a good description.
Mm-hmm.
You know, little old person.
How you say it? Top ranking.
It was top ranking. No question about that. She was top ranking. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I knew that she would be good, but then it's always, I hope she's good. You know. All right. Hey, you guys live up. I'll see you soon.
Yes, sir.
See you soon.
All right. Peace.